Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's DAF Yomi, Bava Kamma DAF Samach Beis. We are holding at the 10th line off the top of the Amud. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Hanoisin dinar l'zav li'isha. A fellow walks over to a woman, hands her a gold coin. Maybe it was white gold, so she couldn't necessarily tell that it was gold. In any case, he tells her, look, be careful, watch my silver coin. So he pretends that it's silver, and that's what she committed to watch. She's taking responsibility for a silver coin. V'amarle tells her, Zari boy, be careful, watch it. It's my treasure. Shel kasafu, it's a good silver coin. And what happened? Hizikatu, let's say she actually physically damaged the thing. She threw it away. She directly was mazik this coin. Turns out it was a gold coin. Mishalemes dinar zahav. That's what she has to pay. Why? Now the question is, she was really just undertaking to care for a silver coin, not a gold coin. So why is she chayev? If she damaged, if she harmed, if she tossed away the gold, why is she chayev to repay him gold? Because he can tell her, look, my havalech gabe dazikte, what do you have against the coin that you will mazik the coin? So if you directly damaged it, you pay as per actual value. But here's the chiddush. Pash a boy, let's say she was merely careless. She didn't watch it properly. The way ordinary, Shemrim watch their deposits. Mishalemes shel kesef. In this case, she's only going to pay him as per the value of a silver coin to Amalek, because she can tell him, look, that's what I undertook to watch. That's the level of shmirah that I was committing myself to do. The Amalek nitirusa, the kasba kibili alai. I was makabel upon myself. I accepted. I committed myself to do a natira, a level of shmirah required for silver, but not to watch a gold coin. So we have this sort of split halacha. If she was careless, if she failed to guard it properly, she can say, look, you told me silver. Okay, I'm responsible for silver. I wasn't willing to undertake responsibility for gold. But if she did a direct mazik on this thing, it's a totally different story. She has no business harming and breaking and destroying stuff. There she pays as is. Amar le Rav Mordechai le Rav Ashi. So Rav Mordechai turns to Rav Ashi. Atum b'derav masnisola. You have this halacha in the name of Rava. Anani masnisa pshitalan. We actually learned the same halacha from a brisa discussed in yesterday's daf, right at the beginning of today's Amud. Chitin v'chipon b's'orin, b's'orin v'chipon b'chitin. Let's say he asked his friend to watch over some chitin, some wheat. He piles up the wheat and he covers it with barley, obscuring the wheat beneath it. So the fellow now thinks it's barley. Or s'orin v'chipon b'chitin. He had permission to bring him s'orim. He covered it with chitin. Something goes wrong. How much is this fellow going to pay? How much is he responsible for? In both cases, he is only responsible as per the value of barley, because in the second case, he only allowed him to bring sa'irim. That's what he's willing to undertake. That's the chiv that he has. In the first case, it was covered with barley. That's what he thought it was. So bottom line is, what do we see from here? If I committed to watch sa'irim, that's what I'm committed for, nothing more. Apparently he can say, look, I'm responsible for barley. Here as well with the Isha accepting the silver coin, which turns out to be gold. She can tell him, look, Nitirusa, I never accepted upon myself. I never committed to watch over a gold coin. Amar Rav Shamis Milsal Rav Yehuda. Let's go back to the Mishnah where we learned regarding Tamun Boish. If a fire goes out and burns something which was not visible, was concealed beneath something else. something, let's say, hidden in a haystack. Rabbi Yehuda says you pay for it. Rabbanan say you're pot. Says Rav, Sham is mus Rabbi Yehuda. I actually heard a halacha relating to Rabbi Yehuda's shita that you pay for a taman. I don't recall exactly what it was. Amar Shmuel v'layada Abba May Shmiel Rabbi Yehuda. So Shmuel responded to Rav and he called him Abba in a respectful way. You don't remember my Shmiel, which halacha you heard? I'll tell you. I'll suggest the halacha. This is the halacha. The Rabbi Yehuda the Machayev al Niskei Taman Beish, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that you're meant to pay, even for items which were concealed, which were hidden from view. So the question is like this: you burnt down the guy's haystack. Now he comes and claims that there were some shovels inside, there was some equipment there, but he can't prove it. Asu takonas nigzal bi'ishay. So the halacha is just like by a person who was robbed. The victim can go to the bezdin and under oath claim this is what he took from me, and you have to pay that. Here as well, they made a takana, the same idea of takanas nigzal they made bi'ishay when it comes to the fire. So if a person was harmed by way of a fire, bi'ishay of chaveroi, he can get up and claim this is what it was. I had such and such items hidden inside that haystack, and you pay for it. Boya Meimar. Let's take it a step further. What about a musser, a person who hands over, his friend's possessions to the authorities, to the tax collectors, or whatever? Boya Meimar. Asu takanas nigzal b'musser. Do we have the same takana that the victim can present his items, or in this case, value, whatever it was that was taken from him, money? Do we make that takanas nigzal by a musser, a person who was a victim of Mesira, of this informer, or not? Now, Aliba demanda Amar Leida Nina de Garmi, according to the opinion that we don't act upon Garmi. Garmi is similar to Grama. If a person causes his friend damage, but he does it indirectly, such as in the case of a Musser, where he informs on him. So we don't collect on that. There's no question that the whole, discussion here doesn't apply. There's no question. The mesirus nami lo danina, because we're not going to act upon mesirus. We're not going to hold the meiser accountable in the bezdin. So there's no point of discussing this whole. Ella kidiboil. The question will be aliba the amar danino din de gami. According to the other opinion, that we do act upon dina de gami, and a musser must pay up for the damage that he causes his friend. So the question is, how far do we go? Do we have this takanas nigzal, which we explained before, that the victim can get up and claim and swear and we believe him? Also takanas nigzal v'masr, the mishtaba v'shakal, which enables him to collect by way of simply swearing, or maybe not. This explains because maybe the whole idea is just a chiv midrabanan in the case of the masr. Take it, we leave it unresolved. Says the Gemara, Hugavar, there was this fellow, the batash, he kicked the kaspita, the chavrei. Going to Rashi, kaspita is an argas shemanichem by ksafim, a money box. So he kicked it into the river, Shadi ben Ahara, and there it goes. Awesome, Mori. So the owner of this safe deposit box comes and yelling and screaming. Va'amar, he says, Hachi v'achi hava li begavo. I had so much money inside there. He gave us the amount. Yosef Rav Ashi Bava Kamma. So Rav Ashi was sitting and analyzing this halacha. Ki agavna mai. What would you say in this case? Do we trust him or not? Amar le Ravina Rav Acha bei the Rav. Va'amar le some say Rav Acha bei the Rav Rav Ashi. Lav hayne mas nissen. Doesn't this case match with the halacha in the Mishnah that we believe this victim? We take his word for it. This none. U'moidim chacham Rabbi Yehuda. Even the chacham who say typically you don't pay for taman peish, but they agree to Rabbi Yehuda b'madlagas abira. If a person burns down a large mansion, shemishal k'mashem b'soicha, he's liable to anything that was in there. Shekain derech b'nei adam laniach b'batim, because it's common practice to have many types of belongings and possessions inside one's home. And the fact is he has to pay for this. So apparently we accept the victim's word for it in terms of the itemization of the contents of his home. Amar, so he responded. You're trying to compare this to our story with the box that was tossed into the river, in which case we should believe the victim as to the amount of money that was in there. You're right, if you would be claiming just money, fine. My skin was speaking the Katan Marganisa, he's claiming that it was full of diamonds. What would you say in this case? Shall we assume that it is acceptable to leave, to put diamonds or pearls into this box, and therefore we take his word for it, or maybe it's something unusual, in which case, he can't just claim anything he wants. Take it, we leave it unresolved. Let's go back to the fellow who burnt down the house. Toin kasa de kaspa biramai. Suppose the homeowner whose house was burnt down claims there was a silver goblet in my house. So the question is, can he go ahead and obligate the attacker? So he says like this: Chazina. We take a close look and we evaluate. Inish amidhu. If this victim is a person who is assessed. Amid means to assess. We assume that his standard of living does accommodate this type of utensil. The islay kasa de kaspa. We assume that he has, silver bechers. Inami, or alternatively, inish mehemnu. He's a trustworthy person who people trust with their deposits. The mafka the inish gabe. In which case, it's reasonable that somebody else would have perhaps deposited his precious silver by him. So then, mishtava v'shakal, he makes a shvur and he takes the money. Otherwise, lavkal kamini has no right to go and make these exorbitant claims. Throughout Shas, we have a term called a gazlan, a robber. Then we have a chamson, chamas, right? Any difference between the two? Ma bin gazlan and chamson. What's the difference? He says very simple. Chamson Wed May. A chamson sort of forces the sale to go through, but he pays for it. Gazlan, on the other hand, just robs. Wed May, pays no money. So he responded, well, if he's paying for it, why is he called a chamson? It's a legal sale. Ravuna taught us to lua v'zav, a person hangs his fellow up. It's just an expression, means he forces him to sell an item. It's vini, it works. So, it's not something we recommend, but legally, the sale is valid. Why is he called a chamson? Like Kasha answers like this. It depends how far he goes. Had amar reitzani. Yeah, if the seller ultimately says, okay, I'm doing it, then it's done. That's not called chamas. But if the fellow didn't, ultimately go along with the sale, he didn't concede at the end. He didn't say, reitzani, I'm willing to do this. So, you paid him for it and you forced him to give it to you. But he didn't actually agree. Even at the end, he didn't agree. That's called a chamson. Continues the Mishnah. Gates sheyatza matachas apatish. So a fellow is, hacking away with his hammer, whether he's a blacksmith or whatever, and a spark comes shooting out, v'hizik, and causes a fire. Chayav, he has to pay. Gomel shayiton pishton. Another example, you have a camel loaded up with flax. V'avav rab, walking along the road, v'nichnas pishtonoi l'sechachanus, and his flax sort of slips into the store, v'dolku b'nei shel chavani, in which side there's a candle lit, and the pishton is ignited by that candle. V'hidlikas abira, and causes a fire, ignites a fire which burns down the the building. Baal gomel chayav. So the camel owner, who wasn't careful with his load, is chayav. But that's all because the ner was inside. You have no business bringing your flammable items into the store. But if the ner was sitting outside, the store owner left his thing outside, then he's liable for any damages. But here comes an interesting chiddush. This is one of the rare instances that we find Chanukah mentioned in the Mishnayos, around 7 or 8 of them throughout Shas. B'ner Chanukah Potter. There's one exception to the rule. If this ner sitting out of the store was a Chanukah menorah, then there's a special dispensation for that, and he's not liable for any damages. The fact that we are exempting the store owner because of the Ner Chanukah, Shema Mino, that we have a right, we can prove a halacha regarding Chanukah licht. With Rabbi Yehuda, we can learn Ner Chanukah mitzvah l'anicha b'teichasara. Preferably, we place it within 10 tefachim to the ground to show that it's really a Ner Chanukah. It's not just there for illumination. Why? How do we see that from the Mishnah? Because if you can place the Chanukah wherever you want, even above 10 tefachim, so why does Rabbi Yehuda exempt the candle owner just because it's Ner Chanukah? He's potter. Why'd you put it so low? In which case it would be it would get in the way of the camel. You can tell the owner, you should have put it up in the air, way above where a camel and his rider would reach. That proves our point. Mitzvah sorry, meant to put it very low down. Amri, so the answer given was no. You don't necessarily prove anything from here. Perhaps we could say that it's perfectly fine positioning it even above 10 tvachim. So the question was, why is he given a pass? My Amris, regarding your question, you should put it way up beyond the reach of a camel. The answer is like this. Ultimately, he was doing a mitzvah. He was involved in a mitzvah. Rabban, don't go that far. Don't make so difficult for him, because ultimately he was trying to do a good thing. He was doing a mitzvah. So even though technically he could have placed it further up, but we don't compel him to do so, and therefore ultimately we say he's patur. Rav Kahana, but there is a maximum height as well. Darash Rav Nosson, Rav Yumi, Mishmei de Rav Tanchum. So Rav Nosson Rav Yumi quotes Rabbi Tanchum, Ner Chanukah, she'nicha lamala me'esrim amma. If you put it way higher than 20 ammas, which is basically out of your field of vision, that's worthless. It's psula. And he has two more examples of this type of halacha with a 20 amma maximum height, because sukkah, right? The point of a sukkah is that it should be visible and discernible. We're talking about the schach. So the schach must be within 20 ammas. Ukimavi. Another example is the halacha of mavi. So you have an alleyway which leads into the street. The halacha is there needs to be a kaira, a beam across the entranceway to sort of make that distinction, that differentiation between the street and the private alleyway, which allows us to carry in the alleyway, etc. So that's something that has to be visible and within one's field of vision, in which case Chachamim set the maximum height at 20 amis. So bottom line is, we attempted to bring a raya that the Ner Chanukah is meant to be within 10 tefachim off the ground. Well, we left it inconclusive, but although in halacha actually it is brought down as a halacha, and regarding the 20 amma maximum, that's an absolute halacha that above 20 is possible. Hadron Allah HaKoines. Continues the Mishnah. Meruba midas tashlumei kefal. Midas tashlumei Bava Kamma. So we know that if somebody steals something and he's caught, he pays kefal, he pays double. And that applies to any sort of item, whether it's a living being or just an inanimate object, as opposed to a different type of payment called tashlumei Bava Kamma, 4 or 5 times as much as you stole. That only applies to very specific items, as we're going to see in the Mishnah. So again, says the new Perek, Meruba midas tashlumei kefal. There are more instances where kefal payment is applied over the other payment, midas tashlumei Bava Kamma, rather than the Bava Kamma payment. So kefal occurs more often than Bava Kamma. How? Shemidas tashlumei kefal, because the kefal formula is noyeges, applies bein bedavar sheyesh bo ruach chaim, whether he stole an item that's a living being, an animal, a cow, a sheep, ubein bedavar shein bo ruach chaim, or any type of item, so living or not, as opposed to umidas tashlumei Bava Kamma, the 4 or 5 time payment, eino noyeges elo b'shar v'seh b'lvad, it only applies to a shar, an ox, v'seh, a sheep. Shenamar ki yignoiv ish shar iseh utvachai mecharei. So basically what happened was like this. He stole an ox, utvachai, and he slaughtered it, he shechted it, or he sold it. So now his penalty jumps 5-fold. Instead of just giving kefal, double, he has to pay 5 times as much. Vayeseh, which Rashi explains in Chumash, involves more shame and embarrassment because he had to carry it on his shoulders as he was running away. So his liability diminishes somewhat. So if there was a tvicha or mechira, shchita or a sale, it only jumps up 4 times as much, and that's how we get to the lashon arba v'chamisha. So clearly, kefil applies to anything, arba v'chamisha only to living beings, to animals. As we're going to see in the Gemara, it's not limited to shar b'seh, but any type of animal we'll see soon. Now we have some principles that apply to kefil and arba v'chamisha equally. For instance, ein hagoynev achar haganav. Let's say Reuben stole. Now Shimon comes and steals that same item from Reuben. He's a goynev achar haganav. So rather than stealing from the actual owner, he stole from a thief. So in this case, there's no kefil or dalad v'hei. Ein hagoynev achar haganav mishal tashlim kefil. There's no double payment. V'lo yataveach, v'lo yamoicher achar haganav. Nor if he does a shchita or mechira after stealing from a thief, there's no payment of mishalim tashlum arba v'chamisha. Asks the Gemara. So we found so far one advantage to kefil over arba v'chamisha. What about another possible advantage? V'ilu midas tashlum kefil neheges bein beganav bein b'toyin tanas ganav. What about this other disparity? Kefil, on the one hand, can theoretically apply to a thief who actually stole from the owner, or a toyin tanas ganav. This involves a person who was a shomer, who was entrusted with an item, and now he claims, oh, it's gone, it was stolen. It turns out he's the thief. We learn from a pasuk that he pays kefil. If he swore falsely that it was stolen, it turns out he's the ganav, he pays kefil. So kefil applies to a regular ganav, or a toyin tanas ganav, one who falsified, who presented a false claim, as though it was stolen from him. It turns out he's the thief. But that's unique to kefil. Dalad v'hei arba v'chamisha doesn't apply to a toyin tanas ganav. Umidas tashlumi arba v'chamisha eino neheges ela beganav bilvad. But dalad v'hei only applies to a real ganav. Why doesn't the Mishnah does not spell this out? That this would be another advantage of kefil over the other payment. Oh, apparently it's not so. Apparently arba v'chamisha applies equally to a regular ganav or a toyin tanas ganav. That's a riot to Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Yehuda hatoyin tanas ganav pikadon. A person who falsified a claim of thievery by a pikadon, by a deposit. Mishal tashlim kefil. Turns out he's the ganav. He pays double. And likewise, if he was a tavachu machar, suppose he was entrusted with an animal, he claimed that it was stolen. He stole it, and he did tvicha mechir mishalim. He pays 4 or 5, because there's no difference whether he's a real ganav or a pretending ganav. There's another version of this discussion. The fact that the Mishnah did not list this as an item pertaining to kefil, as opposed to the 4 or 5, that would be a raya. Lema mesayeya le'der rabchia ba'aba da'amar rabchia ba'aba Rabbi Yehuda hatoyin tanas ganav b'pekadon. If his shomer pretends that it was stolen, turns out he is the ganav, mishal tashlim kefil, he pays double. Tavach u'machar, turns out that he did the shchita or the mechira on the animal that he stole, mishal tashlim arba v'chamisha. Right? From the fact that the Mishnah omitted this when it started with meruba, we find advantages to one of. This is not one of those advantages because it applies to both equally. Says the Gemara, miktani ein bein. Not so quick. The lashon of the Mishnah, the omission in the Mishnah isn't necessarily a telling sign, because the Mishnah doesn't start with the words ein bein. We find that other places in Mishnah is ein bein. There's only one difference in this and that. It doesn't say that. We're not giving us a comprehensive presentation of the comparisons and differences. Meruba ktani. We found one item. Ton of a share. There are advantages. There are things that are found by kefil over dalad v'hei. Ton of a share. We have one example in the Mishnah, but perhaps there are more. One of which perhaps is the toyin tanas ganav, which can result in kefil and not in a arba v'chamisha. And the Mishnah tells us what is meruba by kefil, because midas shemidas to shemay kefil neheges, it applies to any item as opposed to are Bava Kamma, which is limited to animals. Minan Amili. So how do we know that this is so? The Tanur Rabbanan, we have a brayso. Al kol dvar pesha. This is the pasuk describing kefil. Any sort of thievery, any sort of violation. Al kol dvar pesha. That's a very general, term, alluding to any item that he may have stole. Klal, right? Then it says al shor, al chamor, al sev, al samlo. We have itemizations. He stole a shor, a chamor, a sev, salma, a garment, prat. So these are very specific descriptions of the items that he may have stolen. Then we have another general, all-inclusive term, al kol aveda. Any sort of, lost item. Chazar v'kol. Once again, a general term. So we have a three-step formula, klal, followed by a prat, and then a klal. Tadani can only include something which resembles the specific items, elokena prat. It doesn't have to be exclusively these items. That's the point of klal, prat, klal. You can sort of expand it a bit as long as it contains similar elements as to the detailed items. So we say like this: as long as it's similar. Ma prat mefurish davar hamatatl gufei mammon. What's unique about the specific examples in the pasuk? Shor, chamor, davar hamatatl. They're items that can be moved around, v'gufei mammon, and they have inherent value. Av kol davar hamatatl gufei mammon. Likewise, any other item which has these same characteristics, as opposed to, so pretty much includes everything except for just a couple of things. Yotzukar kois, as opposed to land. So a person, throws his friend off his property, he stole the property. That doesn't generate kefil, she'enim metalton, because it's not something that can move around, so that's out. Yotzu avodim, as opposed to slaves. If you steal a slave, there's no kefil. Shuk kois, we find that the Torah equates an Eved Kanani to land, because it says, they're considered like an inheritance, like an estate. So they have the same halacha. And Yotzu Shtaros, as opposed to documents, a person steals a document, even though it has the metalton aspect, but Ein Gufei Mammon, it doesn't have inherent value, it's just meant to, Rashi says, German Ligbeis Mammon, it enables you to collect, but it doesn't have inherent, it's not valuable on its own. And one more thing, Yotza Hegdish, as opposed to stealing from Hegdish property, Re'eu Ksiva, the pasuk by Kefil speaks about an item that was given to Re'eu, right? Something to watch, and so Re'eu is your equal, your friend, and therefore Kefil does not apply to Hekdesh. Okay, we'll continue B'ezras Hashem tomorrow. Let's just quickly recap today's daf. A person is only liable in as much as he took responsibility for that item, but if you slipped in something more expensive and he doesn't know about it, he's not going to be responsible for that. We had the halacha of takonas nigzel. At times, Chachamim sort of trusted the victim as to what exactly was taken from him. So that applies by a victim of a robbery. The question is regarding Taman Be'esh, regarding a Masur. We had the story of the box that was kicked into the river. Question is, do we trust the owner as to its contents? We discussed the definition of Chamsin and Gazlan. We discussed some halachas in Ner Chanukah. And Meruba Midas Kefil over Dal V'hei, because Kefil applies to any item as opposed to Dal V'hei only to Ruach Chaim items, living beings. We started the Brisa, which gave us the sources, and B'ezras Hashem will continue tomorrow. All the best to you, and Tzlach Rabba.